Good afternoon and welcome to our workshop, Removing the Headache from Vendor Vetting. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Angie Yazulaitis and I will be your facilitator for today's session. As always, we are very excited to bring you up-to-date information from a Reclamere expert in educational format to help you review, plan, and budget for your vendor vetting needs in the last quarter of 2016. As usual, a few housekeeping items before we get started. Today's presentation will be more of a Q&A workshop, and we will be opening up for additional questions at the end of the session. Please feel free to send over questions using that feature on your GoToWebinar panel. We will also follow up with registrants and attendees to answer any questions we may not have time to address, and we will be providing you with a certificate of attendance for those of you who may be using this for CLU units. This webinar is being recorded, and we will provide the link to you in our follow-up so that you can share the information with other members of your team. Today we have Connie Maskavich teaching our workshop. For those of you who have joined us before, you know that Reclamere is a leader in data security, data destruction, offering a full range of specialized IT asset management and information security services, and that they offer several educational opportunities throughout the year. Reclamere is proudly celebrating their 15th year in business this year and have been providing additional educational workshops as part of this proud milestone. Connie Maskavich is a Senior Security Compliance Analyst for Reclamere. She's a certified information systems security practitioner with many years of information technology and security experience for large organizations. She is well-versed in data security and data services. She performs risk assessments and risk analysis for clients and is an integral part of the Reclamere Data Security Experts Forensics team. Prior to joining Reclamere, Connie served 24 years in the IT department of Lee Hospital, now called Duke LifePoint Conemaugh Health System, and 8 years with Northrop Grumman, supporting a classified Air Force contract in a high-security role. She was also security and privacy analyst for Philips Healthcare, a worldwide healthcare equipment and services provider. Connie takes the importance and scope of security seriously, protecting EPHI and PII from both a business and personal standpoint. Thanks again to all of you for taking the time to be with us today. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. You should be able to see the full agenda on the screen for today.
You can see that we'll be covering several issues. Connie, you know many organizations start assessing and planning for 2017, and that includes vendor vetting. Why is this topic gaining in importance, and where does someone begin?
Thank you, Angie, for the introduction, and thank everyone for joining us today. Why is this topic gaining in importance is actually twofold. One is due to something called the Omnibus Rule, and for those in healthcare, you should be very familiar. It's part of the HIPAA regulations, and the Omnibus Rule holds covered entities such as hospitals and large healthcare systems and other large organizations responsible for the actions of their vendors. So that's a why. That's a big why. And another big why is also data breach prevention. A large number of data breaches are directly a result of actions of a business associate or vendor. And we are in the business of preventing data breaches wherever possible. So that is one of the whys. And the where to begin, we'll be answering that as we go through these slides, but we believe where to begin is with a robust security questionnaire.
Excellent. Thank you, Connie. So I think everybody has probably heard about information security questionnaires for vendors. But could you go a bit more into how that process works in general, Connie?
A questionnaire is really the best way to vet your vendors. It's a way for you to perform a risk ranking on your vendors, to determine their risk before or as part of signing a business associate agreement. You want to complete this process before you enter into that agreement so that you know when you do build this a relationship and have a business associate agreement with your vendors that they have been properly vetted, that you're comfortable with where they stand from a security level. And again, the Omnibus Rule, there have recently been the first fines handed down in regards to breaches and incidents that were caused directly by vendors. So You want to make sure that your information security questionnaires are effective and that you're comfortable with the security posture of your vendors.
Okay. These are pre-screening questionnaires. And what would they typically include then?
They are pre-screening questionnaires, which is also a tongue twister. So I apologize in advance if I stumble over that several times. What the pre-screening questionnaire was, you want that to provide insight into your vendor's current risk profile. And some of the things that you want to cover are their general business practices, their culture. Do they grow a culture of security awareness, such as having internal security training, making their staff aware of security in a variety of ways? Do they have BAAs with other business associates? Because that gets into a real tangled web of relationships. So if you're signing a BAA and your business associate has not signed an adequate BAA with their associates, their associate causes them an incident which then feeds back to you. So it just gets all tangled up. One of the things you want to be certain that your BAAs are handling their business associates in a proper manner. And another very big one that you want on the questionnaire is an incident response plan. If an incident occurs, you want to handle it before it becomes a breach. If anything suspicious happens or anything questionable happens, you want to be very certain that your business associate has a proper incident response plan in place so that things can be addressed before they escalate.
Yeah, that seems to make sense. This next part is extremely interesting to me, which is actually what happens when I get the results about a vendor. And I think more importantly, what happens if I'm not satisfied with the report or the results of the questionnaire that I would receive?
Well, first of all, you want to use the results for the things that we have listed here, identify gaps, if there are potential compliance concerns. You may have just questions or concerns that you need clarification on. You may just want to have a meeting or a phone call after you get the questionnaire back and provide some clarification. And you can also use them to determine which vendors are best suited. Every business has business partners that are very well suited to one another, and some, even though there may not be any glaring issues, you may see the results of the questionnaire and just determine that they're not the best fit. And if you're not satisfied with what you receive, at that point in time, then that's when you have to, you as the decision maker have to make some choices. Whether you're willing to accept the risk of what it is that you're seeing that you don't like or the areas of concern. If you want to give the vendor a timeline or a deadline in which to rectify the situation and become compliant. That is entirely up to you. That's the purpose of the questionnaire. When you get the results back, you use them in whatever way serves your business the best.
Okay, that seems to make sense. Connie, I've heard you talk in the past about certifications and what they mean, what they're telling you about your current vendors. Can you talk about that a little bit for our audience?
Certifications are excellent, and many of these certifications will be accepted in lieu of a questionnaire, especially in dealing with what we refer to as our Tier 1 business associates. And these are large corporations, large companies who are not going to take the time to sit down and complete a questionnaire in order to do business with you. They're going to hand you their certifications. They're going to hand you their attestations. The process to go through to receive these certifications and attestations is much more stringent than what they would go through in answering the questionnaire. And also, as part of the attestation process, if there were any deficiencies or any issues that they were notified of in the process of receiving their certification or receiving their attestation, that will be noted. And you will be aware of it in that way. And then you have the same option with that as you would with your questionnaire. Is it a risk that you accept, or is it something that you want them to address? Again, the larger companies, the larger businesses that have achieved these certifications, and even some Tier 2, which are the mid-sized businesses, even some of them will also have the certifications and attestations. And that, again, if you have one of these and they make it available to you, it's as good as or better than any questionnaire that you may present to them.
Okay, so I guess what I want to ask, and I know I didn't really plan to ask you this, but on the flip side of that, then, if you already know there's no certifications, does that kind of say, oh, I don't really even need to go into the questionnaire? I mean, why would I want to work with a vendor with no certification? Or would you still move forward with the questionnaire?
Oh, no, you would absolutely want to move forward with the questionnaire. Not all companies have the wherewithal, the requirements to meet the attestations, but that in no way eliminates them from being a viable business partner. Some companies may not see the benefit in everything that's involved in an attestation or certification. It may not serve their particular business plan at this time, but that does not eliminate them from, those are the ones that are ideal candidates to complete the questionnaire. Just because they've not gone through the attestation or certification process does not mean that they're not secure or not a good choice. It just means for whatever reason they've not become certified. They are actually the ideal candidates for the questionnaire because you can still get your questions answered even though they don't have the attestation to show you.
Okay, so it's more just like a heads up to be aware they don't have anything, but it's certainly not disqualified.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I know it was very important when we were putting the workshop together for you to talk about an organization maintaining the integrity of their system. And that's really part of ongoing vendor relationships. So can you talk about what you mean when you say maintaining the integrity of your system?
When you enter into a business relationship, a business associate agreement with a vendor, you are allowing them some level of access to your system, your facility, your information. In particular for healthcare, what we're most concerned with protecting is electronic protected health information, personally identifiable information. So what you want to make sure you provide for your vendor is the access that they need to perform their tasks and no more. N-O, more. And we call this the need to know concept. If they don't need to know it, they don't need to have the ability to access it. Now on the flip side of that, you don't want vendors to have to struggle to do what they need to do because you've not given them the adequate access. For example, if you're dealing with an insurance company and all they really need is the financial end of things, they don't, for their purposes, need diagnosis or medical record information, then you would only provide them the records that have financial information. Conversely, if you're dealing with another company that needs the medical records but doesn't need the financial information, then again, you want your systems will be, the integrity of your systems will be much easier to maintain when people are only accessing the information that they need to have in order to perform what you've agreed upon their jobs will be. Does that make sense?
It does. So I guess what I would ask, though, is this a real problem? Do you see situations where organizations really are providing too much access to their vendors?
We absolutely do see this because, and we'll allude to this several times throughout the course of the presentation, the reality of today's business world is that everyone is strapped for resources, for funding. So what we see people doing is just pretty much having a standard access. If you enter into a business associate agreement here's your log-on password, here's your key, whatever, and they can access everything. And as a result, there have been breaches and incidents that arose from this. And it's mostly done as a time-saving measure, but what we like to say is it's well worth the extra time that you may spend in setting up some more specific accesses for specific purposes. In the long run, it may take you a little bit of time in the beginning, but it's going to save you a lot of potential issues in the end.
Okay. I can see how that would be. I guess, you know, when we talk about the questionnaires, and you already went into this somewhat, but I want to summarize for everybody what the vendor vetting process for pre-screening questionnaires, in your opinion, must contain, at a bare minimum at least.
At a bare minimum, exactly. One of the nice things about a business associate agreement questionnaire is you can tailor it to your own needs and your own organization. But that being said, these three are things that would absolutely have to be included. And we talked a little bit about your BAs having BAAs in place. And that, again, that I hope everyone in the audience is clear on that, because it gets a little confusing and a little, like I said, it's a tangled web. But it's everything touches one another. So if you're dealing with a business associate who has another business associate that they've not vetted, that they've not had fill out the questionnaire, or they've not reviewed, or whatever the case may be, and they access something they shouldn't, there's a breach or an incident, and then that spills over to you. So you want to be certain that all of your business associates have a robust business associate agreement plan in place. You want to make sure all of the BAAs are current, that they're reviewed regularly, and again, the incident response plan is huge, because we like your hope is always that an incident will be caught before it becomes a breach. And if you have an incident response plan in place, it's not triggered only when something big and bad happens. It's triggered when there's something suspicious, something just a little off, something that was caught in an audit log process, something that someone saw, and the incident response plan kicks into place, and it's addressed before it escalates to become a breach of major proportions. So I would say these three are the top three that you always want to be certain that your questionnaires contain.
So in other words, and I think I'm going to say this right, but I think it's a good chance for you to chime in. If I have a business associate, I also want to make sure that they have an incident response plan. And then they also, and that they go through the pre-screening questionnaire with their vendors, and that their vendors also have incident response plans in place.
Correct. Correct. And again, it can become mind-boggling if you think of how that. I picture it in my mind like a spider web with just rings that go out and go out and go out, but everybody's interconnected. You can really only control a certain amount of that. You can't go to, like that commercial you say, your BAAs and their BAAs and you can't go out to infinity. But you do want to make certain that your BAs have at least a robust procedure in place that gives you a comfort level that they are properly vetting their BAs, and that there's an incident response plan in place on both ends so that you're as protected as you can be. You know, we always say with risk, you never eliminate 100% of the risk. You just get it down to a manageable area and do everything you can to be as safe as you and your company can possibly be.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So when you go through this, how often are you working directly with your vendors on this? And then I think more importantly, what should your security relationship look like with your vendors, throughout the remainder of the year?
And this is an excellent point, and I'm glad we put this in here because a lot of people tend to think of BAAs as a one-time deal. You've done the vetting process, you've signed the agreement, and you put it in a drawer and never really look at it again. We advise no less than an annual review of all of your business associate agreements. In addition to reviewing them, there should be a continual two-way communication. Within the BAA, there should be language that states if they have a significant change that you are to be notified. And a significant change isn't necessarily something bad, such as an incident or a potential some security measures, that they've upgraded one of their systems, that they've added someone on staff with some security certifications. It could be anything good or bad, but there should be that two-way communication. It should be worded in the BAA that notification will be shared, and the communication throughout the course of the agreement is important, as well as the review process. We have already dealt with situations where when we ask them about business associate agreements, they don't know where they are, they don't know when they were last signed, whoever was supposed to be maintaining them, oh yeah, they're not there anymore. So it has to be a continual process. It's not something that you sign and forget about.
Okay. So I don't know if you can you think of an example of like what a change in systems might be that would trigger that, communication between the business associate and the covered entity?
Well, certainly if they had any type of an incident or any type of a potential incident, we would want to know about that right away. Some other things that you would want to know about with your business associate is if they do have an attestation or a certification, you want to know if that's current, if that remains current, if there's been if they have gotten any fines for anything, or as simple as a rogue ex-employee, someone that they let go that had access. Now, even though their access is removed, it might be something that, hey, this person used to work here, we had a very unfriendly parting, just want to make you aware that, just small things if everyone shares the information, small things don't become big things in the security arena.
Okay. So one of the things that, I've learned from Reclamere certainly is that, risk control really is about process and knowledge, like having processes and having knowledge. And it seems like this is just a perfect opportunity to talk about the role of using a partner in vendor vetting. So why would a hospital or other organization outsource this whole pre-screening vendor vetting process?
Well, Angie, that comes back to what we alluded to earlier. Part of the reason why a partner could be your best choice is resource-based. No one ever has enough staff or enough money or enough time to complete the many tasks that are needed, especially in healthcare when you're dealing with such highly sensitive information. By entering in an agreement with a partner, it frees up your staff to do other duties. A partner also makes sure that all of your business associate agreements are executed thoroughly and consistently. The questionnaire is the same. A partner would provide the questionnaire. They would perform the initial screening once they got the questionnaire back. All of your BAAs would be in an online repository that would be easily accessible by, let's say the hospital would have an online repository that they could access them, as opposed to in someone's drawer, in an Excel spreadsheet on some administrative assistant's desktop. There would be a safe online central repository that would be accessible by anyone, where all of these would reside. And there would also be built-in reminders for when it was time to review the business associate. There would be a mechanism in place to share the kind of information that we talked about, even if it's just a particular email address or a particular contact, that you would be able to share this type of information. So it really centralizes the process. It makes it more consistent. It makes it thorough, and it frees up resources on the part of the organization.
Okay, thank you. I know we actually got a question on this, but we have this in the presentation today. Is it even an option in 2016 to not use these pre-screening questionnaires? And what potentially happens or could happen, if I don't?
If you choose not to use a pre-screening questionnaire, you are assuming the risks. You are assuming risks that you are not even aware of. If you complete the questionnaire, you're aware of the risks. It is then entirely in your hands what course you choose to take, whether it's a risk that you're willing to accept, whether, as we talked about, you give your vendor a certain time to fix it, you clarify it, but it's all in your hands. If you don't screen your vendor, you don't know their security posture, you don't know what risks you're taking on, but with the omnibus rule, you're still accountable. We have been involved in several post-breach investigation cases that were directly caused by vendors. And just recently they have started, there was one actually in Philadelphia, they have started handing down fines for business associates who are involved in breaches and the organization that they're signed with. So in my opinion and in that of our organization, we don't think not screening is an option at all. And again, you see all the negativities there, the commercial penalties, fines. It's a PR nightmare because anytime you suffer a breach, according to the state data breach notification laws, you have to notify, after a certain number of people are involved, you have to notify them. There's something that we call the wall of shame that is public, I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over this. I want to say public publication, but that's not correct. But it's out there for everyone to see, and it's a list of all of the organizations that have reported a breach. And that becomes a PR nightmare. Again, we are involved in several post-breach cases, and again, it's the snowball effect in a really bad way, that it's not only the people who were affected, it's their families and anyone whose information was included, and it's just not something that you want to be involved in any way. But if you're not screening your vendors and their security posture is not something that you're comfortable with, you are taking on that accountability blindly.
Okay. So I think what I'd like to do at this point is we wanted to stop a little bit earlier today and get into some questions because this is, a workshop. So hopefully at this point, if anybody has any questions, we have a few coming over already. This would be the time for you to, use your question feature and certainly send them over to us. We have somebody here that's monitoring the questions, so we'll try to get, to as many of them as possible. So, obviously there's a lot to cover, and we know we might just be hitting the surface on vendor vetting. But basically it's making sure you create processes, have tools for proper vendor selection, have strong business associate agreements, certainly understanding the OCR, checking your policies and procedures, and working with experts remains critical as you move into your 2017 planning session. So we're going to go ahead and, Connie, I'll just filter these over to you as I'm getting them. Okay, so one of the questions is, I have been doing this manually. Just kind of a double question here. Can I go ahead and get started with a vendor now and ask my business associates to complete this through a partner, even though they may have done the manual process just a few months ago?
You absolutely can, and this is actually a discussion that I just recently had with our management here, not in regards to ours, but in regards to a question from a client. You absolutely can and should perform due diligence. Because you went ahead and did a manual process, and they have recently signed, and it's not time for the annual review yet, you are still well within your rights to perform due diligence. It's because it's something that you've recently become aware of. A lot of the information security questionnaires for vendor vetting are a relatively new process. It's not something that's been around forever, but so there are maybe companies, especially smaller organizations, that are not aware of this process. Once they become aware of it, they want to do it. And that's absolutely, you would want to do that. What we would suggest is that you go through all of your current vendor agreements, make sure that they are still active. We've already run into situations where they say, oh, we can't go through this and do questionnaires and all of these. We have 2,000 vendors. Well, when they actually go through their spreadsheet or whatever mechanism that they have these so-called 2,000 vendors, 1,400 of them expired and are no longer good. But no one knew that because they weren't reviewed. And of the ones that remain, they would then determine if indeed sending them a questionnaire would be the best option, and then they would do so.
Okay. So this is sort of related. Can a current vendor refuse to do this? And do I still have to maintain working with them because I'm in a current business associate agreement?
Of course, any vendor can refuse to do it. And if you have a legally executed and signed BAA that has not yet expired, it is still a legal binding document. You are still in a business associate agreement with that vendor who has refused to sign. However, you are not obligated to do business with them. So what I'm saying is, while you would not formally dissolve the relationship, you could just say you don't anymore. You could say that their access, you take their access away. You cannot be forced into doing business with someone who refuses to allow you to perform due diligence. And to me personally, if I have a vendor that I have an active BAA with, and I bring this questionnaire up and they refuse, that would be a huge red flag to me, because to me it would be indicative of something that they don't want to share, something they don't want to know about, us to know about, and I would no longer be comfortable maintaining a business relationship with that particular vendor.
Okay, that makes sense. Before I go to the next question, I do want to address, somebody asked if we would be sharing the slides. I can certainly do that with individuals that want them. Also, the recording will have the slides within. So yes, to the folks that have reached out for that, we will be in touch with you. Okay, so I think this is a great question. Is there shared financial responsibility when using a partner to do your pre-screening? In other words, do organizations have the ability to share this cost with their vendors who they will basically be screening?
That's actually one of the really beautiful things about a partner relationship is, while your partner that's performing your business associate agreements, that's sending out the questionnaires and vetting them for you, they will charge you a fee. You can then pass that fee along to your business associates when you send them the questionnaire. And while it sounds like you're making someone pay to do business with you, it's becoming such a common practice that it's going to be universally accepted, if it's not already, very soon, because of the security ramifications around business associate agreements. So yes, the cost can be passed along. You would pay your partner, and then you would pass that cost along to your vendor. So again, that's the beauty of it. You get a really good product with all of the benefits that we discussed, while in the process you can get most of, if whatever fee you've paid, most organizations are able to get that back from their vendors.
Okay. So, all right, let me read this one. So you talked about, you already talked about the wall of shame, but when you're talking about these incidences where they do specifically do improper vendor vetting,
they could have been eliminated had proper vendor vetting been done. So I guess that would have to be a yes. One situation in particular, an organization acquired another business. And when they acquired this business, lost in the shuffle of acquisitions and mergers and legal forms and everything else, really vetting the business associates of the business that they acquired kind of got lost in the shuffle. So fast forward 6 months down the road, they've acquired them, everybody's humming merrily along, and a vendor of the business that the organization acquired caused a breach, which then, as we said, filtered up from the business they acquired to the organization that acquired them, and it was large enough that it was a reportable breach. So letters had to go out to patients, the OCR had to be notified, they're on the wall of fame, and once the OCR is notified of a breach, there is a long, extremely involved process that must be gone through. There's a very thorough investigation and a lot of documentation, and again, as we already mentioned, the public relations nightmare, the cost of a breach. Anything that you could pay for in advance to avoid a breach is going to be small pennies compared to what the cost of a breach could be to your organization.
Okay.
Does that answer the question, Angie?
Yeah, I think it does. I'm going to skip ahead to a different question because I think it kind of piggybacks on this, and it's, I think this is a good one. Should I report a vendor if I do the pre-screening questionnaire and I feel that they are, truly negligent with their security processes?
That's a very good question, and I would say I would. If you've done the pre-screening questionnaire, or if they've refused it and you've done your own research, or if you've done it and they come back, I would certainly give them the option to, maybe sit down and have a discussion and give them some advice about the areas where they are extremely negligent. And if they don't care and they're out there doing business and they're dealing with EPHI, I would definitely think that reporting them would be the right thing to do.
Okay, I thought that's a good question.
That's an excellent question.
So how long does it typically take if I'm letting my vendors know and I'm using a partner? How long would it typically take my vendor to complete a thorough pre-screening questionnaire?
That's going to depend on the size of the vendor, their staff, and their available personnel. A lot of factors figure in. But even a very thorough vendor questionnaire is not something that it's going to take you a full 8-hour day to sit down and complete. It's going to be more carving out the time to complete it, and it may be something that whomever receives the questionnaire may not be the person that has all of the answers. By that I mean if you send it to the CIO, he may then have to send it down to his network staff or down to his IT director or down to her medical records department. So probably the most time involved would be in making sure that all of the proper people are contacted that may have the feedback necessary to complete the questionnaire. But it's not extremely time intensive for anyone to complete and get back.
Okay. So this next question, again, I'm going to skip ahead to because I think it makes sense. And maybe this varies, but if I'm using a partner to complete my pre-screening questionnaires with my vendors, and my vendors have questions or issues with the questionnaire, will my partner, work with them, or is that still something that I'm responsible for?
I think your partner would be the one that would do the initial vetting process and the initial answering of the questions and the going back and forth and clarification. Ultimately, the final decision is yours because it's your business. Your partner organization would be more than glad to provide you with advice. But your partner, one of the greatest benefits of using a partner organization to do this process is so that they can take that off of your plate. They can go back and forth. They can get clarification. They can ask and answer questions. Once they've done all of that, then ultimately they will bring it to you. They will bring their findings to you. They will give you their advice to you. But the ultimate decision still rests with your organization. The partner is not going to make all of your decisions for you. They're just going to gather all of the information and give you their recommendations.
Okay. So you talked about this, but the questions worded a little different. Can you set timelines for a vendor, which I believe you did say yes, to correct any issues you may see after they complete the pre-screening? But this goes on about, is that a policy or a rule? Is that a policy with any rule or anything, or is that just something that, you're kind of making up? We're going to give you 3 weeks to fix it. Or is there something in writing somewhere that says, you have to give them 3 months to fix it?
To my knowledge, and I can verify this with Angie Senior-Keating, our CEO, to my knowledge, there is nowhere that dictates a specific time limit for that type of action to be taken. I think it's probably up to the organization. If they're entering into an agreement with someone and it's something that they need done within a specific time frame, they may say, you know what, if you're going to have to fix this within the next month or we can't work together. Or if it's something that's just a general associate agreement and it's not something that has a very pressing deadline on the part of the organization, you might say 3 months or 6 months or whatever. To my knowledge, it's arbitrary based on the need of the organization. Any partner site is a good partner site will have the good of the organization at heart. They're not going to be dictators. They're going to be just what it is, a partner. And they will let you know, if you say to your partner, I need this business associate, I need this task performed by this business associate in this amount of time, then your partner would work to make that happen. But as far as I know, there's nothing written or anything in place that dictates that timeline other than business need.
Okay. All right. So I do have another question here, and it's, you talked about incident response plans as being crucial or necessary to what you should look at when you're pre-screening. Is there a bare minimum of what you should tell your vendors their incident response plan needs to include? Or is there a template? Is that something a partner can provide?
A partner would be able to provide a template. I think a thorough questionnaire would ask not only do you have an incident response plan, but maybe delve in to just the high points. I mean, obviously, we don't need to know every nuance of your incident response plan, but maybe, for example, a questionnaire could say, does your incident response plan address fill in the blank? How often is your incident response plan reviewed? How often is your incident response plan tested? You know, just a couple generic questions that would lead us to have a good understanding of the robustness of their incident response plan. So if they say, yes, we have an incident response plan, hasn't been reviewed in 6 years, never been tested, right there, that's going to be a red flag that their incident response plan is not going to meet the criteria that we would need it to.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm just checking here as I don't think we have any additional questions coming over. Hold on, I may have gotten one. Just want to double check. If anybody does have a last minute question, now would be the time to go ahead. Ask them. Okay, so I don't see any. Connie, do you have anything additional that you would want to add to any of the questions?
The only thing I would say is just keep this in mind. All organizations, specifically healthcare, but really every industry has a vendor, and every vendor touches your stuff. And the analogy that we like to use is when you're entering into a business associate agreement, it's just like letting someone come into your home. You want to be comfortable with them. You want to feel safe with them, and not to say that a vendor questionnaire is going to eliminate any possibility of an issue caused by a business associate, but it's going to greatly reduce the chances. Just as you could let someone into your home and they could turn out not to be who you thought they were, the same could take place with a business associate, but the vendor questionnaire greatly reduces that risk and provides you with a comfort level that your business is going to be safe with these people that you are allowing inside.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I want to take a minute and just thank everybody for participating in the workshop today. I did mention at the beginning that we would be sharing a recording and that we will follow up with all of you in the 1 to 5 as well. I also mentioned you'll receive a certificate of attendance for today's session in case you want to use that for continuing education. And certainly if you want to have a direct conversation with Connie, she would absolutely welcome that. So, again, as we follow up with you, feel free to reach out. I'll also include her bio. I just apologize for the audio difficulties at the beginning. It kind of threw me for a loop, and I didn't really go through her full bio there. So I'll include that as well. And I just want to say thanks again, and enjoy your afternoon. Connie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Andy.
All right. Take care, all. Bye-bye.